It starts with an itch and a tingle, and then it builds and expands. And suddenly, all at once, my legs won't let me stand. I scratch till my fingers go numb.
So hello everybody to this episode of Suicide Sucks, and this is the last day of the road trip. I cannot believe it. I think Ozzy's quite looking forward to getting back home and seeing the rest of the family, but I just can't believe how quickly it's gone. And with me in the camper van, should I say, I've got Coz, and she is, believe it or not, a full-time psychology student, and she's going to talk to us about various suicide attempts she's had on her own life, but of course she's still here to tell the tale. She's also lost people to suicide over time, and Coz has recently been diagnosed with ADHD and CPTSD as well. And she's also going to talk about something that I know nothing about, which is a genetic condition called EDS. So welcome
Hello.
To the camper van. It's so lovely to have you here, honestly.
Good to be
now,
here.
I can't tell my listeners what you're drinking, really, because it's not tea or coffee.
No,
We've
it's
got
water.
our first guest who's just having water, but obviously you can have what you want. So, Coz, I'm going to start with the question that I always start with. A lot of people have a lot of dark days, but could you tell us about one of your darkest days?
Yes, so my darkest day was when I was 16 and I'd got involved in illicit drugs with a friend. This was, unbeknown to me, I had ADHD at the time and I was self-medicating. Essentially, I took some drugs into London to meet a friend, got searched at the club and was arrested by the police for possession. And then I stupidly told them that I was giving them to a friend, so I got charged with supply. Possession with intent to supply. This is at 16 years of age. I then went through obviously all of the court proceedings with that. I pled guilty, but at the time I'd just been going through the process of coming out. I was kicked out of my family home and I was homeless, and I didn't know that I was self-medicating my ADHD with illicit drugs and drink at such a young age. I got caught by the police. Obviously that stopped everything. I didn't go to prison. Luckily the judge kind of looked at my track record, my grades in school, and he took pity on me when I was looking at 4 years in prison. So yeah, at 16. That didn't happen. I got no custodial sentence. But at the time, because of the sensitivity surrounding me being gay and also me then getting arrested, it was a scenario where I was a shame on the family name.
That must have brought your whole world crashing down.
It was a lot to process at 16. I was struggling a lot with the shame and the guilt, the embarrassment of it all, and because, you know, frankly, I had been brought up better than that, but it is what it is. I made a stupid mistake and by my own admissions got an even larger charge with the police because I was too honest, not very streetwise, but you know, it is what it is. And yeah, I got a load of tablets from a chemist. Do you want to know like what I did, or
do you know
what sort of detail do you want?
Yeah, we're all about everything.
Okay, I took all of the tablets out of the blister pack. I mean, I was 16, I'm 40 now, so I can't recall how much I bought or what you know, what the ratios were. But I went to a local park and it was a sunny day, and I threw all the packets in the bin so that if anybody found me, they wouldn't know what I'd taken and how much of it. It was very premeditated. I felt quite calm. And I went to a local park and took a load of tablets, and my last memory is passing out. And then I woke up with sun on my face. I don't really recall because of how long ago it was, how long I'd been there. But I didn't want to be here anymore because I was an embarrassment. I did that on 2 different occasions and both occasions didn't work. I can't remember the timelines for how long apart they were, but the period from me getting arrested was like the December, and I remember calling my mum up from the police station to tell her, I think it was about 4 days before Christmas, that I'd been arrested, and my mum's voice just broke on the phone, and that sits with me. It rings around in my head even to this day. And I'm 40 now, but I'll never forget the sound of her voice. She was crushed. Then I got officially charged in the April, and then I went to court. I think it was around the May, and I should have gone to prison for 4 years. And the suicide attempts were, 2 of them were within that timeline from the March through to the May. I remember that because it was just after my birthday. I was called, my 17th birthday, I was called a disgrace to the family name, and I think that kind of just tipped me over the edge, so to speak. So
where were you living when this was going on?
I was homeless again then. So I was staying at a girlfriend's house at the time, yeah. So yeah, no, I've no real fixed abode or anything, but it was, yeah, it's been crazy. But it didn't work, and so for whatever reason, I'm still here, and I guess I'll tell you a bit more about that now, you know, all those years later. I mean, but yeah, how I felt in the moment was calm, but I think that was because I'd made a decision. And I have since spoke to a counsellor about my suicidal ideation, and the fact that even to this day, there are points when I feel out of control, and that she explained it to me as me looking for a way to control things. So it's when my mind is chaotic and I feel out of control. She explained it to me that being able to control whether you're here or not is your way of getting some sort of control, which kind of resonated with me and made sense. So it's made me less afraid to have those intrusive thoughts, but it's still something that plagued my life even from very, very young. Even down to things like an unhappy childhood and trauma in the family home when it comes to violence. And I would do things like disassociate. So I would then look at watch Neighbours or Home and Away on the television, and wish I could climb into the TV screen and be with those people instead of where I was, you know. So I think all of that is the way that I need to control things, even though it's incredibly extreme. It's something that's been with me since I was, as long as I can remember, really. So those were the first 2 attempts. Survived, alive and kicking. And then the last, most recent attempt was I think it was about 5 years ago. Just over 8 years ago, I started getting poorly. The doctors couldn't work out why. At the time, I was running a successful business. I had my own home. I was engaged to be married. And I started losing mobility down the left-hand side of my body. The doctors didn't know why. I couldn't play my drums anymore. I couldn't do mixed martial arts. I lost my business, my home, my fiancé at the time, which was a blessing now. But it put a lot of pressure on my life, as you can imagine, and I ended up homeless again. But within about the first 3 years of me getting sick and not being able to walk downstairs and having what they thought were seizures, they didn't know what was going on. I was under 3 or 4 different specialists. My life changed beyond recognition. I'd had a row with my then fiancé, and I made the decision that I'd had enough. I wrote a letter. I put it under some paperwork on the dining table in the lounge. I, again, can't remember what tablets and how many I took, but I do remember being sick, and then I remember passing out, and I woke up the next day, but it was like really late in the afternoon, to my partner kind of like walking through the lounge. And so, you know, attempt number 3 didn't work, which I'm pleased about now. But at the time, I kind of remember just closing my eyes and being really at peace. So yeah, that's my story in terms of my attempts.
So the last one was, how long did you say, about 5?
About 5 years ago, I think.
And so you'd have been 35-ish?
Yes.
So what's changed between then and where you are now? Have you, I mean, a lot of people I've spoken to have said that feeling never necessarily leaves you, but you learn to deal with that feeling of wanting to die. A lot of people have had different types of therapy, different things have worked, psychotherapy for one, you know, walking for another, you know, there's lots of different things. Is there anything that you feel like?
Yes. So for me, 5 years ago it was around 5 years. It'd be 6 years December, my last attempt, around December. But what's changed in that time is I got a diagnosis for the Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. So instead of living in a limbo state, not knowing what groups I could go to for support, for me the not knowing was worse than the knowing what the medical condition was.
Yes.
Also, alongside that...
so just tell us what that is.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, Ehlers-Danlos syndrome is there's 13 subtypes of it. The type I have is a hypermobile version. And what it is, it's a collagen defect that causes... and your body's like, I think it's 90% collagen. So people can have varying degrees of severity of it.
Right.
And so for some people, like the worst version is the vascular EDS. That's the collagen in the heart. And people can have heart ruptures from that and don't tend to live past 50. Then you've got, so my problems primarily are in my bowel. My bowel's too stretchy, so I've had medical history of that. My hearing loss is linked to it because my skin's too stretchy. So where it's collagen, it's in everything in your body, pretty much.
Yeah.
So I have a lot of problems with the ligaments. So my ligaments, instead of being taut and holding my bone to bone, my ligaments are more like elastic bands. So it makes my joints dislocate. So down the left-hand side of my body, I dislocate in my knee, my hip, my shoulder, and my spine. I have 2 ribs that dislocate between my shoulder blades and my neck. You can have full dislocation, or you can have something called subluxation. And the subluxations are where the joints move just a little bit too much. They're not in alignment, and they'll pop back in, and they can take trap nerves with them. So it affects my mobility.
I've never heard of this, and it sounds
quite rare.
Absolutely awful.
Yeah.
I mean, how did they diagnose you then?
So mine was a 7-year process, 7 years of not knowing, and I was originally I got bitten in America, so they didn't know if it was Lyme's disease, so I was under infectious disease, rheumatology and neurology, and it was a process of elimination, ruling out things like MS. So it was quite terrifying. At one point they weren't sure if it was motor neurons disease, and I had to go and have tests, so that was like walking the green mile, that was scary. Good news, I don't, but it was 7 years of torture kind of for me, not knowing. At least if I know what I'm dealing with, I can get the knowledge and I can do the right things to support myself. So
yeah. And is this something that you haven't had all your life?
No, I've had it all my life, and the
Right.
symptoms have been diagnosed as individual things. So for example, I had unexplained hearing loss. I had brain scans. I used to have blackouts as a child. As I started getting a bit older, I was having problems with my shoulder, my lower back. They put that down to sciatica. Right. Then in my late 20s, I was demonstrating problems with my bowels, which they then diagnosed as IBS. So there's been a chronology. Even when I was playing drums in my 20s in a band and I had my own events management company, I was having to alter the way that I played the drums to be able to accommodate the problems in my shins. When I got into my early 30s, started doing mixed martial arts, I was having problems with my shins. They put it down to shin splints. So there was
So everything was put down to something else?
Yes. So there was a chronology of symptoms that I'd experienced, but nothing was kind of joined together as a collective thing. But it's quite rare. And so it's one of those things that until you know what you're dealing with, you don't even know what support group you belong to,
Exactly.
to be able to get the support you need. So for me, that really did affect my mental health. And then, so what's changed is getting the EDS diagnosis 3.5 years ago.
And how do you manage that then? Are there things that you do to manage that?
Yes, so I have to use a walking stick some days. I have to wear shoulder support because my shoulder's very problematic in my neck. So I was in hospital literally last month with it. So it immobilises me to the point that I can't function. Which makes university very difficult. It comes with its own set of challenges. I can't drive sometimes because of it, because I can't physically move my head or lift my arm up. So generally it will be pain relief, which is in the form of an opiate pain patch, but that's because I have so many allergies. With EDS, you have issues with anaesthetic, with sedatives, with pain relief, and the way that your body processes medications. So, yeah.
So is there anything that they can... You say it's about collagen.
There's no cure.
There's nothing that they can do to change?
No.
And did you say that was genetic? I can't remember.
Yeah, so the other 12 subtypes have all got a gene. They haven't identified the gene for my subtype yet.
Right.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Oh my word.
Yeah, it's all still being investigated and looked at and stuff. So, yeah. It's interesting.
I mean, again, for somebody listening who might be suffering with, you know, this list of things that you've said and that they're put down to other things.
Yeah.
You know, you join the dots, and
it
they
wasn't
may
until
well
I got the diagnosis that I understood. The dots joined, you know, and then suddenly it was as I was researching other people's stories, their journeys with it, I realised that there was just so much. I was like, okay, yes, this is definitely the right diagnosis. EDS also overlaps with autism and ADHD. And so, again, another thing that's helped me on my mental health journey in terms of spending years of my life self-loathing, not understanding myself, not being able to articulate what I'm feeling, the frustration and the guilt and the shame you feel just for being you. And last year there was a trigger from my childhood to do with my parents that created a trauma response in me, which I didn't know was a trauma response. And it manifested in the form of tics, not being able to sleep, and a fairly manic episode where I was quite out of control and didn't know what was going on. A friend of mine had her own business that was, and she specialises in mental health. One of my other friends called her and said, look, you know, Coz needs your help. She's not good. And I didn't know I wasn't good because I was just in the state that I was in. It's only when you come out of it that you realise that you're in a sort of manic episode. I didn't know at the time. So this friend came and saw me, asked me a load of questions over the course of like 2 or 3 appointments. And within that, I was then told I had CPTSD, which is complex post-traumatic stress disorder. And the difference between PTSD and CPTSD is PTSD is a single isolated traumatic event. CPTSD is more complex because there's lots of layers of trauma. And that was linked to my childhood, getting arrested, coming out, those types of things. And so I then got diagnosed with the ADHD, which was, I'm going to tell you this now, it was the biggest shock of my life because I had friends with ADHD and I would always be like, they're nuts, you know, they are off the beat. And I never ever realised I lacked so much self-awareness that I never actually realised how extreme I was until I got told I had ADHD. Then I did some research, saw the symptoms, started to understand, and then realised that it was like the choir sung, la, you know, and suddenly I understood myself. So
what kind of symptoms did you look at and think,
so,
la?
So social anxiety, I self-medicated with, as you know, in my younger years, illicit drugs. But interestingly, am I allowed to say what drugs?
No? I don't see why not.
Okay, so my drug was cocaine, and what I've since learned is that ADHD is a lack of dopamine in your brain, which is your get up and go, right? And cocaine boosts dopamine, right? So when my friends were all doing cocaine, they were all high. I wasn't. I was able to function on a normal level. I was able to speak. My brain slowed down. So for me, doing cocaine was never about getting high. It was actually to feel the same as everybody else does on a normal level with their dopamine levels, you see. So this is why cocaine is quite, it can be quite addictive for people with ADHD because of the dopamine deficiency that we have. So similar to smoking, interestingly. The King's College are doing a study at the moment based around nicotine and how that helps ADHD symptoms. And they're looking to engineer a medication based around that that's not addictive. So instead of the stimulant medication that we're prescribed. So with ADHD, some of the symptoms that I struggle with the most are, for example, insomnia, a dysregulated nervous system, so that we don't sleep. So our melatonin levels are not right, our cortisol levels are through the roof, and our dopamine levels are low. So what happens with that is my sleep is just woeful. I can go days and days and days with none.
Have you always been like that?
Yes, from as long as I can remember. Yeah.
Really?
Yep, but I didn't know it was ADHD. I just had bouts of insomnia that I couldn't explain. ADHD for me with the sleep has been very cyclical in nature. I can't say that there's a specific catalyst or trigger, but it is just, for me, the sleep is probably the most intrusive symptom because the sleep and lack of sleep affects my EDS, and the two. So lack of sleep equals more pain, less mobility because I'm awake longer hours. So the two symptoms really, the two conditions don't really go hand in hand, which is problematic to live consistently. And I joke, with ADHD, the only thing consistent with me is inconsistency, and that's, I've learned to love that about myself, instead of loathing this and challenging it all the time. Now I understand what's happening. I've learned to just accept myself as I am instead of spending I've spent 39 years of my life masking to please everybody else, to make other people feel comfortable, forsaking my own feelings that I feel in here. And last year, I don't do New Year's resolutions, but last year in December, I made the decision that I was just going to be the most authentic version of myself, and I wasn't going to mask anymore. I was just going to do me.
Yeah.
And those that...
That's such an important message, because honestly, that the whole, once you start to love yourself...
Accept yourself is the key thing.
Yeah.
You know, for me, acceptance and understanding. Without understanding that I had ADHD and these things that I'd loathed about myself, from executive dysfunction, you know, that is not being able to physically start a task unless you know, for me, you've got, you know, have to, need to, want to. And more often than not, when we have the lack of dopamine, getting a task started in the first place is next to impossible, because we don't have the dopamine to drive us. It's your get up and go. And a lot of the time, our get up and go has got up and gone, right? So getting a task started, unless it's last minute and really urgent, you don't get the dopamine from it.
Yeah, that's...
So if you need to do it and you want to do it, it doesn't get done. And you'll do things like dopamine chase. So instead of doing the tasks that you really, really have to do, we're not getting dopamine from that, so we'll go and do something else.
You're describing my daughter at the moment.
Yeah, am I?
Honestly.
Yeah. And like alongside that, for example, I've got something I call the hobby graveyard, and this is my impulse control, you know, so yeah, truly, you know, and so I joke about it, but I never knew I was really bad with money until I became a student. Because up to that point, you know, Amazon had been coming to my house nearly every single day, and I had the disposable income to cover it, right? So I never noticed I was bad with money. My bills were paid. I was cool. When I become a student and suddenly I'm ordering, I don't know, my latest pyrography box and pyrography thing because I've seen it on TikTok, and I think, oh, I'm going to do that. It sits in the cupboard doing absolutely nothing. I've bought a drawing pad, charcoal pencils, you name it. I've got... During lockdown, my ex wanted her nails painted, so I ended up spending hundreds and hundreds of pounds on this great big stack of gel nail polish, and I don't even use it. You know, it's ludicrous. I was going to start a podcast. I've got a mic, all this stuff in. It all sits in the cupboard doing absolutely nothing.
No, the hobby graveyard.
So, you know, it's like it's ADHD tax. You know, you forget that you've subscribed to things, or you forget to do something, and everything. You know, you leave the house, drive to the shop, you've not got your bank card. Oh, you've got to drive all the way back, get your bank card because you've left. And that's ADHD tax, I call that. You know, and it's one of those things that I've learned to love the parts of me that I never felt were lovable. And by that, what I mean is by becoming aware and accepting myself. I've got a page on TikTok, which is called Naughtyniceyneurospicy. And that is learning to love the naughty, the nicey and the neurospicy parts of ourselves, right?
Love it.
And so I'm doing my book, obviously, and where I write about it. And in the book, I'm writing about the dark side of ADHD, the light side, because every coin has two sides to it, right? And then I'm giving some tangible examples of things in my life to see if people will relate, you know, because there is lots of awareness on ADHD, and yes, we have lots of quirks. We speak really fast, we interrupt people, we don't sit still, we don't hold eye contact, we are really impulsive and really fun to be around. And people that meet us and want to be in a relationship with us, they love that when they first meet us. And then when they're in a relationship with us and they realise how crazy we are and how everything we do doesn't make sense, they don't like it anymore. But when you reach a place of accepting all of those facets of yourself, whatever anybody else has to say, you're too sensitive. Yes, I am, and I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that, because you know what? I feel on such a deep level, it means I love on a deep level. You can't have one without the other.
Yeah, and it's their problem if they can't cope with the fact that you're too sensitive.
But historically, that would have affected me. You know, I think not being diagnosed with ADHD and not understanding myself has given people a lot of power to use against me and take what they deem weaknesses and flaws in my character and use it against me. And for the first time in my life, I'm speaking freely to everybody that wants to listen about neurodiversity online, and people are accepting me just as I am. And guess what? Along that process, I'm helping other people. I've got children that come into my chat on TikTok and they resonate. I've got their parents ringing me up for advice. Why? Because the best way to understand a neurodiverse child is to speak to a neurodiverse adult.
Exactly.
So while I have on 3 different occasions tried to take my own life, what I can say to you is that I truly and have intrinsically believed that there would be a purpose in all my pain, and that there would be wounds that came out of the wisdom that came out of my wounds, and that right now I know, studying my psychology degree and doing what I'm doing online, writing my book, and trying to support and help others feel better about themselves. The one thing that ADHDers are is we're very kind people. very kind, and I'm very proud of that. And so for me, I have a voice, I want to use it, and I want to use it for good, because words have a lot of power. And so for me, that's my purpose now, and is to empower others and to show them that, you know what, you can be homeless, you can lose everything, you can lose your mobility, you can lose yourself, you can try and take your own life. But the reality of it, at the end of it, is that everything you've gone through, you can use for good. You can help other people that are at stage 1 of the journey. I'm not the finished article, I never will be, nor do I want to be. I don't want to... There's a few quotes I like. One of them is, I don't want to just survive, I want to thrive. And the other is, why exist when you can evolve? So now, instead of beating myself up with all the questions of why am I like this, why do I do this? Now I understand the why. That why's lost its question mark, therefore it's lost its power. So for me, now I know, that's why. The message is very different, and I'm able to just be at peace with who I am. And I want to encourage others to do the same.
Do you think that you could have got that same kind of peace if you'd have if you'd have not been diagnosed? I mean, the reason I ask is because there's a big thing at the moment, isn't there, where there's waiting lists as long as years and years for people to get diagnosed. Is there a way that somebody listening like you can almost just bypass the need to be medically diagnosed? And
so this is a very touchy subject right now, and I think there's the first thing is there's 3 types of ADHD, and so one is the hyperactive type, which you would typically see in boys. They're the ones that get diagnosed at school because they're not able to concentrate, they don't sit still, they're the naughty kids in inverted commas, which is just not the right way to profile a child at all. Then you have the combined type, and you have the inattentive type, and the inattentive type tends to manifest more in girls, and it's harder to detect and diagnose when young, because the hyperactivity that you see in boys that's projected outwards is internalised with the inattentive type. So that same hyperactivity is going on, but it's in the mind and it's concealed. We're kings and queens of masking. And so then you have the combined type, which is what I have, which is where I flit in between the two. So again, with typically what we're finding now, I haven't got facts and figures because I haven't come armed with that information to talk, but women are getting diagnosed much later, which is why we're seeing this great big increase of women that are my age, or within those 20 years either side, that are getting diagnosed now, because there wasn't the knowledge. Back in when I was at school, there wasn't the knowledge there of the 3 types of ADHD, and the hyperactive child, boy or girl in school, was just deemed a naughty child, which is so wrong. And I think if people suspect they're different, no one knows themselves better than you. And I'm not an expert, I'm not qualified in neurodiversity, but I'm an expert by experience, because I've lived it every day for my life. And so if somebody suspects that they have it and they're in the process of getting diagnosed, you don't need a diagnosis to belong to a group and talk to other people with neurodiversity. You don't need that. That's not essential. Yes, it's good to have it, and yes, the waiting times are ridiculous. This is part of the reason why I want to do my degree, because I want the credentials to back me up, because I want to challenge the government. There needs to be better schooling for children with neurodiversity. I'm seeing it across my nephew, who's struggling with his mental health from young because he's in a mainstream setting that does not support him correctly. The funding's not there. He's got the EHCP. He's still not getting the right support in the school, but there's no available schools for him to go to get the correct support full time. One of my friends, Bev, her child, he would refuse to go to school. And what we're seeing more often than not with young children is that they're being pushed through primary and junior school, and then they're being palmed off into secondary school, and that's when the EHCPs happen, because it's too much work for the school to arrange the fundings, right? So what happens is then they're they either get into a special school at a secondary school stage where they've got the EHCP, or they end up being put into a mainstream setting that damages them even more. And so, you know, this is a future generation, and I have a few theories on neurodiversity, and this is why I'm studying psychology, not to become a therapist, but because I want to understand the ins and outs of it and study it. And eventually, what I would like to see is to be able to push the government on their funding and challenge them, but I need the credentials to back me up. It needs to change, and I intend to use my voice for that. This is why I'm writing my book. It's why I'm building a platform online, because that we need to raise an awareness and get people all working together, because the damage that I'm seeing to my nephew when he's scratching his face, punching himself in the head and calling himself a stupid brain, when he is not stupid, he is beautiful. And the biggest gift we can give any neurodiverse child is acceptance of self and understanding of self from young. This is what we need in the world. And we've got I'd say an archaic schooling structure that doesn't support the different ways in which all children learn. And I have a theory. I'm a very spiritual person, and I believe that people with neurodiversity are spiritual beings, and we have a different level of awareness, you know, and we see the world through a different lens. And just because that lens is different doesn't mean that we're wrong. Actually, it means that we see the world in a very beautiful way, and I'm really proud of that. And I want every neurodiverse person that listens to this, or anyone that suspects it, to be proud of their kindness, their sensitivity, and their compassion, and to trust their intuition always, you know, because the points that I've ignored mine, I've been a come a cropper. The night I got arrested, I knew I was going to get arrested, and I still went out, you know. So for me, I think that if we had a schooling structure that supported meditation, self-love, you know, how to reframe negative self-talk, that's taught us real education, like where food comes from. You know, you ask a child these days, where food comes from, Tesco's. No, it doesn't. It comes from a farm. You know, there's life skills we can teach. And I think that I would like to set up a school that's based in like forest or farmland that helps children. And my intent to, with my book sales, to donate 100% of that to a charity that I want to set up. And I would like to see schools set up that are in the format of like a forest, where we teach children life skills, but alongside the English, maths and science curriculum, and teach them through creativity and spirituality, and how to kind of like nurture themselves, you know, and love themselves as they are. And that's my dream. And I would like to then franchise that across the UK and focus on where there's the biggest send lists of waiting children. And that's my dream.
I'm absolutely in awe of this, because I just couldn't agree more that is what is needed now. Yes. That the education system is so archaic and just doesn't lend itself to happy children. So
they are the future generation, and already watching my nephew struggle with his mental health cripples me. And so I need to be taken seriously. So I need the credentials to back that up. And that's my sole driver behind studying. So through all the pain has become a purpose. Through all the pain has become power. And with a voice, you can change a nation. And as a child growing up without a voice, I'm a big ambassador for children being able to speak and use their voice. And so, while we may be different, we're still fucking awesome, excuse my language.
Coz, I love it. I absolutely love it. So, and we fucking are.
Yeah.
Every single one of us.
Yeah. Everyone is neurodiverse or not. The point is, it's about believing in yourself, accepting the dark and light, because there's dark and light within all of us. But it's removing the shame, it's speaking about it, it's accepting yourself, the good, the bad, the ugly, the naughty, nice and neurospicy, however you want to chalk it up. But the point is, we're all still sentient beings trying to get by and live on this giant rock, you know, and the biggest thing we can all be is kind, right? So surely, like I've found myself, you know, at points over the years, and I've written about this in my book, about how abusive my self-talk was. And this self-talk, I would never, ever breathe that into existence to another person in the world, ever, because it's abuse. So I've realised that I was abusing myself in my mind consistently. And as a child that had my basic needs met of food and clothes on my back, outside of that, it was a pretty traumatic childhood. And I saw things that no child should have to. And I was taught based on the example of my mum and my dad, you know, that my needs came last because the environment, you know, I'm one of four, the eldest of four, and I found out as adults that we all used to blow our birthday candles out on our cakes and wish my parents would split up. The environment was that toxic, all four of us, and we never spoke about it until we were adults. And so that tells you the environment was not one that was conducive to healthy, wholesome children. And what it taught us was that you could be mistreated, and that even though you didn't want to live in that environment, your needs came last. So this molds you into an adult, you know, of putting your needs last, accepting people mistreating you. And I guess I call it being a cheated child. You know, we were cheated on as children. And then what that does is it conditions you as an adult to cheat on yourself too. So we set the bar on how others treat us. And if we don't have healthy boundaries, positive self-talk, and we don't do the work on ourselves, what we're going to do is keep allowing and enabling people to mistreat us that way, which compounds everything, right? So I choose not to cheat on myself. I choose not to do that anymore. I choose to have healthy boundaries and speak up. I don't care if it offends somebody, because those that don't like it can leave. If somebody wants to leave my life, let them. I genuinely only have room in my life. And do you know what? Sometimes in that loss, and I've lost people since I got diagnosed with ADHD, and I suddenly had boundaries, and I was like, no, I'm not people pleasing anymore. I'm not going to say yes because it feels right. I'm going to call you on things. It's what it's done is it's cleared out a batch of people that I've known for most of my life. Right, but what I believe is life is all about energy, right? And so as you lose the old and your frequency changes, you just don't vibrate with those people anymore. So for me, what that does is it increases my vibration, and what's happened is I've welcomed all these new people in that match me, and it's fantastic.
Yeah, it's like the law of attraction, isn't
Absolutely.
it?
And it's phenomenal, you know.
Yeah.
And I truly believe that it all starts with us being energetic beings and how we speak about ourselves. If you're not going to, if what you say to yourself you would never say to another person, then that needs to stop. We need to reframe that.
That's a really good thing for somebody to action.
Yes.
At home.
Yes.
On a daily basis.
Yes.
When you get those intrusive thoughts, stop and ask the question.
Yes. And
would you say that to somebody else?
Yes, and also alongside that, you know, like a lot of the time with ADHD, we spin out. So as I've said, the only thing consistent with me is inconsistency. So sometimes my routine will completely spin out, as it does with mental health, and you're not consistent in anything. You beat yourself up. It becomes that sort of negative cycle. And one of the things I do to help kind of get me out that funk, and I'm not saying all of these things work, but all of the time. But one of the things I do is I do one consistent thing each day, and I set an alarm on my phone, and it's a glass of water at 11 o'clock. It's a really small win, but it's a win that I get every day.
Brilliant.
That's my one consistent thing, and then I build on it.
I was going to say, will you then have two consistent things?
Yes, but the worse my sleep is, the more chaotic I am. That's how ADHD tends to work. The two things go hand in hand. But one consistent thing each day, and mine is a glass of water at 11. It's ridiculous, but that's my win for the day. And if that's the only thing I got done that day, that's okay.
Yeah.
Because there's still tomorrow. And instead of beating myself up about those days and those moments, because you know what, it is okay to not be okay sometimes. And instead of feeling guilty and shame about that, actually, it's all right. Tomorrow's a new day. I'll start with my water at 11 and I'll build. And slowly, over the course of the last, it'll be 8 years October since I started getting sick, that transition from overdose to surviving that to then moving on, splitting up, being homeless, to then getting the EDS diagnosis, then the ADHD one, that's all in the last like seven and a half years. But the transition throughout all of that is who I am now. So I wouldn't change any of it. I wouldn't change any of it.
No, because it's made you who you are today.
Correct. And actually, for the first time in my life, since making that commitment to being authentic and seeing that people actually like me as I am, it's quite a nice feeling. And so for me, I'm going to stay true to that, and I will shine light on the darker parts of myself to help others and show everybody that we're all a mix of light and dark, and that's okay.
Yeah. I love that. That's a perfect place to end. We're all mixtures of light and dark. You absolutely ooze positivity, and I cannot see how your goals, that they're just, you're going to achieve big things. I can tell. I wish that my daughter was younger so that she could come to one of these forest places. So, Coz, thank you so much for joining us today.
It starts with an itch and a tingle, and then it builds and expands. And suddenly all at once my legs won't let me stand. I scratch till my fingers go numb.